haven't killed anybody.
that you're
So
willing to admit.
yeah. So I think I'm good, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I was thinking about that because I was like, she is I'm like, I'm glad I can call you my friend.
You can. Meetings
Good.
now streaming live on YouTube. Okay, so we're
So
on.
I'll
Are we
butcher your
live?
name.
I just got
No,
a
it
notice saying we're
connected.
live.
Yeah, I connected it to YouTube and but the
Okay.
recording is off, so I can
Oh,
turn the recording on. I wouldn't do you like that.
well, no, it's fine. I mean, I know what I got into.
Well, you're better than me. Oh my goodness.
I'm
Uh,
excited for you starting school. That'll be fun.
yeah, I'm excited and nervous at the same time because I stopped school because I had failed um like 3 or 4 classes. And
Mm-hmm.
so because I was using Voc Rehab, I had to pay back for the tuition as well as the stipend. And
Oh,
I couldn't start back until I had paid that off. And I was like, dang it.
yeah,
So
that's
I paid
brutal.
it off and then I was like, forget it. Just forget school.
Yeah.
Um, because it's just a weakness of mine. I mean, I love to learn stuff, but
Yeah.
then letting it sink in just doesn't always work well for me. So
Well, where's the rub?
I have difficulty retaining information.
Okay.
So I can sit here and learn. You could be doing a lecture and I could love everything you're talking about and say, man, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then take a test next week and be like, yeah, it was awesome, but I don't remember what was awesome about it.
Okay. I mean, that's not abnormal. So do you have some techniques to help with that?
Apparently not.
Oh, well, before you start school in January, there may be some
Thanks, Mom.
mnemonics. Oh, am I mothering you? No, because my son is getting ready to retake the SAT. And so I actually am getting somebody to come and help him learn how to study and retain. Because my son's issue is he's super, super smart. And so he doesn't have to study. But when you do these tests, you have to, no matter how smart you are, you have to study. And so
Yeah.
I'm I found somebody who will help him learn how to study. So that's why I'm
So,
asking that.
yeah. So when I got off, so here's the thing. When I initially joined the army, I wanted to be a combat medic,
Okay.
but they fed me some sort of you're blue green colorblind, which I'm not, but whatever. I didn't know anything about the military, so I didn't know there was this thing called waivers.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't have any family in the military. So when I got off active duty and went into the reserves, I did it for my contract. I did it to reclass to a 68 whiskey.
Okay.
It's a 16-week school. The first 8 weeks is just basically like EMT stuff.
Okay.
Then, since you don't have to take a state license, you take the
Mm-hmm.
national registry since the military will send you anywhere.
Okay.
That kicked my butt, and there weren't funds for me to retest or whatever.
Okay.
But I mean, I loved it, and I love medical stuff.
Yeah.
But then there was that. So I mean, it. I'm sure that I can learn. I can. No, I'm sure. Not I can learn. I know I can. I'm sure I can stand to learn some techniques that are better than what I have.
We all could. I'm just not going back. Actually, I'm going back to school as well. So I
Are
start
you?
war college this summer. So,
Oh, that doesn't count as school.
well, it's a master's.
Is it? I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome.
Well, it'll take 2 years, 20 plus hours a week for 2 years. Back to
Wow.
school. Blech.
So I don't know this, so this might be a stupid question.
No
Wait, there's
stupid
no such
question.
thing. um, what does the masters end up being in?
Oh, I don't know either.
Military leadership or something?
It's something like strategic planning or something like that. I don't
Oh,
actually know. I have no data. I just know I have to do it if I want to make general officer. So I'm doing it.
you don't want to do that.
I do, because I have things that I don't like. And to be a change agent, I have to have rank.
Because lieutenant colonel is not enough. I'm
It's not.
kidding.
It's not.
Wow. Okay, on that note, no, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember, so I only, no, I didn't say that because I hate it when people say that.
Hmm.
I retired at E6, not only
Okay.
E6.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I remember my first duty station, I had uh not a good leader. And so I learned what not to do when I became a leader.
Right.
And so it just, and I remember that, like, not long after I got promoted to E6, I remember doing something that ruffled feathers above me, but took care of the people under me. So I didn't care.
Yeah.
And I loved how that made me feel. And I thought, yep, this is me. This is like my thing right here. This is how I'm going to function.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it just made me say, okay, good. Now I can be a different kind of leader than the negative ones that I've seen. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, you got to be in the system to change the system. So
yeah. So, guess what? It's
I'm
all up
in.
to you now.
Well, I'm there.
On a kind of a random thing, though. So, the VA is going to contact me back about like the women's health up in DC about
Mhm.
MST stuff.
Oh,
So,
great.
because she was like, what is it that you want? We're not the ones that change the ratings. I'm like,
Hmm.
but you're the one that changes policies, and there are other people who this can benefit. My service connection may never change, but it could help somebody else.
Exactly.
So, um, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to tell you from somebody that was there, that experienced it, what things are like.
Hmm.
You might be a subject matter expert on veteran policies, but I'm one of what it's like to experience something like that. So,
Yeah.
not that I would sought out an experience or anything, but
Nope.
who does?
No.
Just saying.
Yeah.
So you wanna start
Yes, ma'am.
because it's all about you. No?
I'm whatever you need me to be tonight.
Ah, I need you to be awesome. Okay.
I'll try.
Yeah, right.
I'll get an A for effort.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, where is that? Oh, it does say YouTube Live. Now I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. So we may have just been broadcasting stuff.
Maybe.
Oops. Oh, well. No shame in my game. I don't think.
Well,
Here. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Medal of Honor podcast. I am Tiffany Marchink, and I am here with Lisa Jaster, who is, in my opinion, Superwoman, but nobody asked me. She uh was it 7 years, 9 years on active duty first?
7 years on active duty. Yeah.
Oh, see, and I was the 9. So, all right. So she started off active duty, went into the reserves. She's a lieutenant colonel. But wait, there's more. She somehow made a mistake and married a Marine and
Oh.
had two kids. No, I'm kidding. And has two kids. And I remember when I was a recruiter and they were talking about women, it was just discussion about women going to ranger school. And then some 3 women went to ranger school. And so as a recruiter, I remember them talking about maybe letting women get into infantry and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool beans. A podcast was never like on my radar. And then guess what? You were one of those people,
I
one of those
was.
3 women. So I have to tell you this. I don't know if you remembered this, but I remember when I contacted you about doing an episode for the podcast, and we had a phone call ahead of time. I told you about the Medal of Honor, and then you said, "Okay, but why me?" There were
Okay.
you said, "Why me?" There's two other people, two other women that graduated before I did, so why me and not them? I was like, "Oh my God, really?" Okay. Because I was like, I have the reason why. And I don't want it to sound like I'm being any kind of rude or anything, but like I was like, well, because you had too many opportunities to fail, or not. Well, you had you were confronted with failure and had too many opportunities to quit, and you didn't. And so I was like, that's kind of the definition of mettle and persevering. So that's why you.
Well,
I'm like,
thank you.
you're the picture of your face is like in the dictionary next to metal. So I was like, that's why. And you're like, okay, let's do it.
Let's do it.
So I mean, so anyway, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're doing this. And yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Sounds
So
good.
um speaking of the Ranger School, so and we're gonna talk about your book, but tell me how did Ranger School start? Like, how did that come up as a thing for you?
So I don't know if how military your audience is, but my sergeant major, so the senior enlisted guy in my unit, just really, really good guy by the name of Robbie Payne. Sergeant major sends me an email and he's like, "Hey, people have been talking about you. There's an opportunity coming up. I don't know if you saw the Alarac, but the Army's looking to see if women can even do this. But step one is if they're interested. So if you're interested, you're supposed to send your name and social security number into your major command, and the Army's going to see if there's enough interest to even have a piloted integrated Ranger School class." And I just wrote them back and I said, "I like room service, not really, not interested." Um, and that was it for me. So Sergeant Major Payne, he's retired now, so I'm going to call him Robbie. But Robbie went ahead and called my husband, because everybody knows in the military, even in the reserve, you're married to the military as well as your spouse. So Sergeant Major called my husband. They kind of chit chatted, and my husband knew damn well, like, Robbie had tried the frontal attack. Alan knew that the he wasn't going to get anywhere with me alone. So he recruited my children. So they did a double envelopment in military terminology, but they attacked me from all sides, basically. And we were sitting down for dinner, and Alan opens up his computer and starts looking up the standards. He's like, "Baby, you can do all this. Why wouldn't you?" And in my head, there's young, awesome women throughout all of the military ranks. You had to be a major or below. I was a very senior major at the time. I was reservist. I was working for Royal Dutch Shell. I had a full-time job that had me on the road at least 25% of the time. And when I say on the road, I mean out of the country, not like Houston to San Antonio, but Houston to China, Houston to Calgary, like big flights. And I was training hard physically, and mentally, I would say I had some mental toughness. But the Army was my part-time gig, and I only owned one uniform, and that was for drill weekends. And I wasn't really at a place in life where I thought I wanted to do this. And I said, some younger kids with something to prove, they can go ahead and do this. I was almost 37 at this time. I was about to turn 37, and my husband just said to me, he's like, "Well, what if you don't try and no woman passes?" He goes, "How will you feel watching the news?" And I thought, well, I would feel pretty crappy, right? And I never had a problem with the opportunities that women had in the military, but it did seem silly that, Ranger School was a leadership course, and women couldn't go. I mean, it's advertised as a combat leadership course, and engineer officers can go, and mechanics can go, and medics can go, but women can't. And it didn't, that categorization didn't pass the sniff test for me. So I said, okay. And I did what any red-blooded American does in 2014, and I took it to Facebook and kind of took a poll, and it was decided I'm going to Ranger School.
Facebook is the place to go.
It is. It is. Now you can do polls on Instagram, much more effective.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should try that.
Yeah, yeah.
What was I going to ask? Okay, well, I guess the big thing. So, goodness. So, obviously, there's with the new president coming in, and no, we're not getting political. I promise, because I'm not a fan of that stuff. But there's with the incoming president, there's a lot of talk of from people that he's looking at appointing in different positions, hearing people say things like, we need to end this thing with women doing a man's job. Women can't do it. If we have women doing ranger and infantry things, it's going to make us more susceptible to being attacked, and we'd have to lower the standards so that women can pass it too. And I was like, really, that part right there really got me, because what you're telling me when you say we have to lower the standards for women is that there's no way in the world we can meet the same standard, the ranger standard, not the male standard, but the ranger standard. And
Right.
and I think I had sent you a text that night saying, hey, didn't you ask or tell them that you wanted to be held to that same standard as them? How did that pan out? Like when you had those conversations with them, you were like, hold me to the male standard.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, the whole time at Ranger School, there has never been a male female standard. The only time there was a separate standard is the standard for hair was the shortest allowable haircut. So for men, that's a shaved head. For women, by regulation, it's a 1/4 inch of hair. So the difference was women had to maintain a 1/4 inch of hair, and we weren't allowed to go longer than that, while the men had to shave their head. And that was the only difference of standards, because nothing was ever published as this is a male standard or this is a female standard. It was 49 push-ups, 69 sit-ups, a 5-mile run in under 40 minutes, and 6 dead hang chin-ups. It is a 20K road march with 35 pounds. Here's your identified packing list. Now, a smaller soldier has smaller boots. So maybe that my ruck was half of an ounce or a couple ounces lighter than some of the other soldiers. But other than that, the packing list is the standard. The waterway's the same. The mountains that we had to hike through were the same. The weapons we carried were the same.
You mean the angle of the incline of the mountain doesn't change when you walk?
No. And we didn't miraculously disappear and find showers in the middle of, the Appalachian Trail. Like, and it was really funny because it was People magazine specifically that, hey, we heard that women had more showers. I'm like, okay, I'm glad you heard that. Where? There's not porta-johns. There's not shower facilities. When you're living in the woods for 10 days, you're living in the woods for 10 days. Like I don't know where the magic showers would appear. Well, they bust you in. They bust us in. We would have been gone for days. Like you don't just hop over somewhere. If you've never gone hiking on the Appalachian Trail, which most people haven't, it's not just, there's no showers. I've gone hiking on the trail. There's one place where you can stop for showers, and it was a 2-day hike to get there.
See. So all right, two things. And I guess deliver it however you want to.
Okay.
Because it's two questions I'll ask at once. One is, that was like only the beginning of all the scrutinization of you being a woman and you can't do this. And Ranger School is already like the hardest leadership school out there, and only men did it. So before you guys decided to go make history. So it was a male only school, and then you guys you guys were the guinea pigs to see if women could do it.
Yep.
And all three of you did it. And I think that's awesome. And so I guess I know there's things about Ranger School you can't talk about, but whatever you can or want to talk about with Ranger School, what was it like going through it and having on top of the struggles of going through it, having this added thing of you're a woman, so you definitely can't do it, and we're going to watch you fail and proudly do so, kind of thing.
Yeah, so I want to say one of the more interesting concepts is a lot of the arguments against women aren't actually gender issues. Like when people start talking gender issues, then I'm ready to discuss and debate. Like, hey, our culture has said that men protect women. Well, okay, if that's the case, now let's really look at that because our older culture did. My father opened doors for women. You know, my husband opened doors for women. The kids, I mean, they do in or they do in Texas, but that's not the norm. And so protecting our women and children is not the norm that it once was. But that's a social debate. And I love that discussion because we can talk about the social issues of integration. And they were the same social issues with um, gays and homosexuals openly serving. You know, those are all things we can overcome, but we need to discuss those. Instead, what we're discussing when it comes to gender integration is we're talking about the strength of women. Well, I'm going to start with a really easy example. Watch the CrossFit Games for 30 minutes and tell me you think women can't physically handle what an average man can. And what I'm saying is, the argument is women are typically weaker than men. It depends. Are you talking pound for pound? Are you talking based on their size? So I'm 140, right now I'm 145 pounds, but I'm 145-pound female. And if I've got a 145-pound, 47-year-old male sitting next to me, is he automatically stronger than me? Or are men typically stronger because they're typically bigger? So the issue, if the issue is strength, then the issue is strength. That's not a gender issue. That's a strength issue. If I've got a female that at the time I went to Ranger School, I was deadlifting 345 pounds. I was bench pressing over 200 pounds. I was back squatting over 260 pounds. I was doing 11 to 12 dead hang pull-ups, 4 sets, not just one time, one rep max, but I could do 15 on a good day. Like this is not something a typical 140-pound male can do. Like the strength to weight ratio was already high. So, going back to your question, like being a female in that environment, my job wasn't to prove that women could do it. My job was to prove that the issue is what are our capabilities and can you meet those standards? And the public was interested in our gender, but the dudes sleeping on my left and right, the dudes walking through the woods with me didn't care. They cared about, could I carry my rucksack? Did I make a big deal when I had to go to the bathroom? Was I able to keep up with everybody when we were moving? Did I know my tactics? Was my camouflage straight away? Were my weapons clean? What was my weapons discipline? All of those things, the tactics, the technical capability, the strength, the power, they only cared that I could do my job. And whether I was 180 pounds or 120 pounds, male or female, it didn't matter. Could I do my job? Could I add value? And could they count on me in a firefight? And what I love about Ranger School, and this is not what the external world got to see, but the internal world, anybody who's been to the school, most people who've been in the military, and definitely the instructors and fellow students that were there at the same time as I was, what you do is one of the ways you can get kicked out of Ranger School is it's kind of like Survivor. You can get voted off the island. So at the end of every phase, you rate everyone in your squad. And say your squad starts out with 14 people, somebody has to be 14th. You can't say, here's my top 5, here's my middle 5, here's my bottom 4. You have to rate everybody 1 through 14. And then when you rate them, you have to check this little box. And it says, would I share a foxhole with this soldier? Yes or no? And the truth was, even on my worst training session, even in my worst phase, my peers were always pretty high, which means I was rated in the top half for most people. So my peers were always high. But on top of that, I don't know of anyone who checked no. I don't know of anyone at Ranger School who said, I would not share a foxhole with Lisa Jaster. And that's really what we're looking for. And in the military, can you trust that person to your left and your right? It's not about having a good heart. It's not about being a great tactician. And it's not even about being strong. It's about being a combination of all three of those so that if you and I go to war together and it happens to be a physical and tactical and technical environment, I know that having you by my side is an asset, not a detriment. So that aspect of being a woman never actually sunk in when I was in the field with my guys. Me being older, that had an impact. People were worried about me. Hey, are you going to be, you know, 37 doesn't recover as fast as the typical age of 22, 23, which is what the boys were. Women, we react, we have different metabolisms than men. And that actually ended up being a huge advantage because while the men were losing 20 pounds at a time, or they would lose, some of these guys lost 10 pounds per phase, even though when we came out of the field, we stuffed our faces. So even after stuffing their faces, they'd still lost 10, 15 pounds. And me, I lost 10 pounds, 15 total. I mean, I lost half of what most of the men did because I'm an older woman and my metabolism is slow as hell.
Okay, so that reminds me of two things. So I joined the military in the mid 90s, and I remember being in Germany when Bosnia was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing field exercises. And I remember we were doing this because I was in an aviation unit. So we were doing not only our own weapons qualifications, but the Apaches were having to do their day fire and night fire as
Mm-hmm.
well. And we didn't have our own, we being women, we didn't have our own tent.
Right.
So we just slept on two cots. There was two of us because there really wasn't a lot of women
Right.
as much in different places. But anyway, so we moved. We slept on our cots in the back, and when it came time to change clothes, all we did was get the poncho, put
Yep.
it on a string, and we would change, and we're good to go. And that's it.
Yep.
And I didn't ever think twice about it. And I know that there weren't as many women in the military, but the whole sexual assault thing was not a thing to me. I didn't ever feel like that was an issue or a thing to be concerned about because, like you were saying, we're on the same team. We've got each other's back. End of story. What's the deal? So,
Right.
so I'm with you on that one. Things I think when it comes to that kind of stuff has gotten worse now than it was maybe but I don't know. Maybe I was too naive. I don't know.
Well,
But
part
the
of it is the unit, right? So here's the thing we're talking about. We're talking about ranger units and combat units and sexual trauma, sexual harassment, sexual assault. Those are huge. And those are issues we do need to discuss when you talk about gender integration, for sure, without a doubt. But the units that we're talking about, the units that we're integrating, are units that are high performing units and they're super protective. If you want to really see how these guys felt about me, go ahead and go on any of these social media posts where somebody's blasting me early after graduation and look at my classmates' responses. When my book first published, somebody wrote as one of the responses, they're like, yeah, I was the guy who almost screwed you out of your go. And I felt so bad about it. And I still feel bad about it. And I've got your back, Ranger buddy. Like there's this bond with those high performing units that we need more of that, not less, where my gender didn't matter, my size didn't matter. Being a mom mattered, being a parent mattered because I had a lot of guys asking me advice as their fiancés and girlfriends and wives were getting pregnant and they're getting married for the first time. That mattered. But again, And I don't want to discredit anybody's experience, but being older, I'm older, happily married with kids. Maybe people were looking at me differently because I fit in some categories that were non-threat for them or, their relationships.
So I'm not trying to create any waves. Everybody has their own opinion about the stuff. So I will say for me, again, back when I was recruiting and this genders, like they had just appealed the don't ask, don't tell. They had just repealed that. And then there's this talk. Anyway, there was a new gal that came in who was joining the army, and I was the only female recruiter in our office. And I remember her saying that came up as part of the discussion. And she said to me, she's like, and I guess she was saying, yeah, I can do it too. And she looked at me and said, isn't that right? Don't you think that we should do everything that men can do?
Hmm.
And I kind of looked at her and said, well, there's, you can't be colorblind for this. You have to be so tall for that. So there are different standards for different things. And she said, well, I want to be, as soon as they open it up for women, I'm going to be infantry. I'm like, okay. She said, don't you want to do that? I said, look, I'm 20 years older than you. Okay.
Yeah.
So doing infantry, that's not in my growth path there. She
Yeah.
said, well, if you were my age, wouldn't you want to do it? I said, probably not. And she's like, what? You think women can't do it? I said, no, you asked me, would I do it?
Yeah.
And that was my response.
Yeah.
Now we had a recruiter, we called him Shrek because he
Okay.
was this big, broad shouldered, huge dude that was infantry.
Yeah.
So I used what you were talking about as an example. I said, well, here's the deal. I told the guy to stand up. I said, now go stand next to him. I said, when you see the two of you together, you look like a little twig next to
Yeah.
him. So here's the deal. Let's say that you're in a military vehicle in the desert or something, and something happens, your vehicle flips over, you get out the vehicle, but this dude is stuck in the vehicle. And oh, by the way, I know you don't know this yet, but he's got a rucksack that has a lot of weight because it has all of his stuff in it. And he's
Mhm.
upside down in the vehicle. Do you think that you could safely get him out without putting your life or his life in jeopardy? And she said, yeah. I said, okay, then do you. If that's what you want to do and it opens up to women, go for it. It's not for me, but if that's what you want to do, go for it. Do what you want to do. That's what I like about the military. So many options. You can pick your job. And if you don't
Yeah.
like that, 4 years later, you can go change it.
Tiffany, I think that's a great example because my husband and I talk about that one because that one, I've heard that one a lot. Hey, if my husband's in a burning tank, you, Lisa Jaster, won't be able to pull him out. And that was the argument that women don't belong. Well, could a 140-pound male pull him out? Could a 120-pound male pull him out? My husband is 260 pounds. He's 6'9". He's 12% body fat still. At 52 years old, he benches 250 pounds for reps every 3 days. Like the guy's an ox. You know what he wrote in response to that person? I couldn't pull somebody out of a tank with full kit on. You can't pull somebody out like that. It doesn't happen. Now, if you're talking about buddy carrying, you're talking about dragging, there's an interesting discussion to be had. But let's talk about buddy carrying because pulling somebody out of a vehicle is, I mean, we can't do it on the side of the road when there's car accidents. We have jaws of life. And you look at those firefighters that are responding, those first responders, and they can't pull young women out because it's just the physics don't work. So let's use an example that might be really applicable. Could I buddy carry my 260-pound husband with his ruck in full gear. Well, first of all, we drop his ruck, right? But he's still 260 pounds plus gear. We're talking 270 pounds. Could I throw 270 pounds up over my shoulders and run at least, I don't know, 50 meters, 100 meters? How far could I go? No, I couldn't do it. But neither could a 120 or 140-pound male. So is the requirement gender-based, or is the requirement to buddy carry a 260-pound male? And if it's to buddy carry a 260-pound male or 260-pound soldier, then there's a whole lot of men that need to be disqualified from that type of service as well. And so those are the discussion points I want to have, is that a lot of what we're associating with gender issues aren't gender issues. That's a standard that doesn't exist. And if that standard needs to exist, then it's definitely not a gender issue. It's a strength issue. And people who can physically do it should be allowed to do it. And people who physically can't shouldn't. And if that means 0 women do it, then fine. 0 women do it, as long as it's a valid standard.
What she said.
I could harp on that one all day. That's a great one for me.
Yeah, it sounded like it. But see, that's what I like. I like the way you're phrasing these things, because when it boils down to it, that is what it's about. In Army terms, can you accomplish the mission?
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of I've had a lot of pilots on the podcast. And so far, all but 2 of them have been women.
Oh.
And which is not a normal ratio when you're talking about the military, especially pilots. But I think one thing that each of them have said is that an aircraft does not care what gender you are. If you can fly it, then you can fly it. End of story.
Right. Yeah.
But yet there were still people who would say, oh no, we can't do that. Women can't do that. Because
And once upon a time, women weren't allowed to be in orchestras because it was assumed that their lungs weren't as big as males, so they couldn't make as loud they couldn't change the volume, and they couldn't play for as long as men, and they didn't have the endurance. And the way that changed is, I believe it was the New York was the Philharmonic had blind auditions where everybody auditioned behind a curtain. And it so happened that the person they picked was a female. And they're like, well, how did that sound come out of her? Mm-hmm. And it's lung capacity. It's not gender. So if lung capacity is the divider, then let's go ahead and talk about merit once again.
So watch this. On that note, I know this.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about music. So
yeah,
and said on that note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I walked right into that one. So I play a couple of instruments. Yeah, and when I went to high school or middle school, I wanted to play the trumpet. Well, we've got too many of those. Okay. How about the saxophone? We've got too many of those too. And I said, okay, what do you not have too many of? How about the flute? I'm like, heck no. I can't, because I blow over a bottle. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I get lucky if I make a sound blowing over a bottle. So they said, hey, you can play the tuba. I'm like, cool. I don't know what a tuba is.
Yeah.
So then the first day of school comes and I go into the band room because the one thing that she said too was, your parents are not going to have to rent the instrument or buy an instrument. You just have to buy the mouthpiece to it and you'll be good to go.
Yeah.
So I walked in and I said, so where's this tuba? And she said, it's in this back closet. And so I go back there and I didn't know what I was looking for. And I came back out and I'm like, it's not in there. She finally came back and said, that right there. And it was this huge, like stood almost as tall as me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck? But in high school, I ended up marching the tuba as well.
Right.
And I'm 5 foot nothing, like not a half inch over 5 feet. And I couldn't even weigh, like I got turned away from joining the military because I was underweight. So I was a little toothpick. And people were like, how does that sound come out of that instrument with her carrying it?
Yeah.
That's just not possible. I'm like, really? Because thought that's what I was doing just now, but okay. And later on, between my junior and senior year, I was in a horrible car accident and one of my lungs collapsed.
Oh my.
And they said that probably because of playing the tuba and marching it for so long and so much, that's what strengthened my lungs for me to be able to breathe off of one lung
Wow.
until they got us out of the vehicle.
Hmm.
And so from that point on, you know, the middle school band director, the high school band director, they both used me as an example. Anytime a student would say, I can't do that. And they said, oh, really? Because
Look at
there's this little
Tiffany.
girl. But anyway, fun times.
Fun times.
Sorry. Wait, this is not about me and the band in high school. This is about you and a book in adult life.
High school's fun.
Yeah. That's why I stayed an extra year. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I did not. I did that in second grade because I didn't learn how to share or something. Um, so you, all right. This is the point. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. And like I think I mentioned at the beginning of this too, you asked me why did I want to interview you for the podcast, because two other females graduated before you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my jaw dropped. And I was like, duh, is what I wanted to say. I was like, duh, I mean, hello, you had the opportunity to, because how many times did you get recycled through?
A lot. I went through
Okay.
phase 1 3 times, phase 2 twice, and phase 3 twice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you got recycled a lot.
I did.
And like I did, like when I went to go reclass to be a medic, I didn't get recycled. So I didn't have that option.
Mm-hmm.
But you, this hardest leadership school in the Army, or probably maybe all of the military, I don't know, you got recycled so many times and you had the option to say, oh well, I tried, I'm gonna go home to my babies. But you didn't do that. You said, no, I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
And so that's, how did that happen? Like, how did you get, I mean, if Ranger School is this tough or so tough, what is it that kept you going? How did you keep on pushing through to finish the school when, especially being recycled so many times?
You know, it was the young men I was in school with. There was one point in time where I called my husband, and it had been announced in the newspaper that all of us were getting kicked out. So originally 19 women started Ranger School. 8 of us made it through RAP week, which is the Ranger assessment phase. And 8 of us were got recycled. And all 8 of us were told, hey, we're kicking you out. We're sending you home. So mentally and physically, I already started preparing to go home. And Chris, Shay, and I, based on our peers that I discussed earlier, were all given an opportunity to try one more time. There was also several men that got the same opportunity. The men all declined and said, hey, we'll come back. We'll go back to our units, prepare better, and come back. But for the 3 of us women, this was the only chance we were ever going to get. And so I remember calling my husband, and I called him, and he's like, baby, you don't have to say anything. Just let me know when your flight's coming in. We love you. We're so proud of you. I got a great husband. I hope he doesn't hear this. It might give him a big head, but I do. I have an absolutely fantastic, very supportive husband. And he was like, yeah, we'll see you at home. Love you. And I was like, I just got offered to stay. And I said, yes, I'm going to start all over from the beginning. And he goes, why? You don't think they're going to let a woman graduate? Like, the system is rigged. Of course, there's no way his wife, what isn't perfect. So it must be the system. The system's rigged. And he was kind of like, well, just, do you really want to stay? And I responded to him. I said, these young men, they've never, and the instructors, and to me, most of the instructors were significantly younger than me, and they were all junior to me militarily. I just said, one at a time, they're changing their minds. They're seeing me out there at 3:30 in the morning. They're seeing me ruck. They're seeing me run. They're seeing me do chin-ups. They're seeing me squat with my duffel bag over my head. They're seeing me sleep in the dirt, not shower for 10 days. And they're looking at themselves and they're looking at me and they're saying, wait a second here, this woman's doing everything I'm doing. She's keeping up. She's excelling. She's helping her classmates. Maybe I need to rethink how I look at women in the military. In fact, maybe I need to rethink how I look at women. Several of them said to me, and they're like, I didn't really understand how hard my mom was because she's a different hard than my dad. But, sleeping next to you in a foxhole or rucking with you, I'm re-looking or I'm rethinking about my perceptions. So, that's making a short answer long or a short story long, which is my favorite thing to do because I'm a
I
storyteller.
might have you beat.
But the truth is, the reason why I was able to stay and endure is I looked at these young men and I saw how their perspective was changing by being around Chris and Shay and I. And I thought the opportunity to truly develop the military of the future is now. I am planting a seed by rucking next to this guy who's half my age. My duffel bags were older than some of my peers. and they're looking at me differently. And someday when they're a sergeant major or a first sergeant or even a platoon sergeant, they're going to have a young man in their formation that's going to disrespect a young woman or disrespect what she brings to the fight. And he's going to go, she can carry her own ruck. She's got this. She's strong. She's capable. And that'll all be because I planted a seed in 2015. So that was my motivation to really keep going, because at some point in time, at several points in time, I thought, I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to get the tab. But the impact I have is not based on whether or not I have a Ranger tab at this point. It's based on how can I impact the Army that I love in a positive way? And the best way I could do that is to stay there and have a good attitude.
So that's your motivation, right? And somebody on YouTube asked a question that did your faith impact your time in Ranger School? Like, was that something that you could lean on and depend on, or were you like, no, I depend on my battle buddies? Like, is that a thing in your life?
100%. So if you're watching a video, I wear a cross. I wear the cross 24/7. The only time I take it off is when I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But it is a cross that I bought in Afghanistan back in 2002. And I've worn it. It's on its fourth chain. And so faith is definitely a part of my life. I don't always behave the way I should, but I definitely try. And I will say that I'm a big fan of that poem or the footprints, where it says, when you saw only one set of footprints,
Yeah.
that was me carrying you. And so I actually I'm going to tell a faith story. So we had church services and we had, I actually had a 40-year-old chaplain going through with me, which was a lot of fun because we were the old guys together. We were mom and dad. And when I went to chapel service I want to say it was in Swamps, the pastor who was preaching to us read all the different Bible verses that talk about looking up. And he summed it up and he said, look at the ground and tell me how you feel. Walk looking at the ground. And then look up and keep walking. The skyline is beautiful. The stars are beautiful. The sun is shining, and on top of that, what is up if you're a faithful person? And we know that heaven isn't necessarily above and hell isn't like in the magma of the earth, but conceptually, when you have those, when you're praying, a lot of times you'll look up and really look for that faith and look for that support. And there was a guy next to me. We were actually bunk mates. As you were talking about in this integrated world, I had a male bunkmate because there were no other women. And he and I both took our patrol caps off, our our military baseball caps for people who don't know what a patrol cap is. And we both wrote in it, look up. And if you ever grab any of my hats, you will see look up written in them. I get them from the store. And one of the first things I do is with permanent marker, write look up. So every time I take off my hat and put it back on, I get reminded that there's nothing good at my feet. But whether it's looking up for faithful reasons or just seeing how amazing our earth is, climbing the mountains in ranger school sucks. It sucks. We smell bad. We look bad. We feel bad. But damn, that sunrise, can really energize you, or that sunset. And yeah, so when you're feeling down, looking down is the wrong answer. Look up, and that little faith synopsis is great. And it actually helps me with my work today and like to this day. I could go on about that forever. Like I said, I'm not a good Christian, but I'm definitely a Christian who's been supported by my faith more than I deserve.
Okay, awesome. And another comment that was in here, they said they just bought your book.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
So, speaking of your book, delete the adjective. So,
Yes.
I think one of the things that you've said is that throughout Ranger School, you kept notes, and that's where you pulled from those notes to write the book. But didn't there was something I don't remember if it was at the White House or whatever, where you were with a friend and y'all were talking about. You know what I'm talking about? No, am I making something up? That
No.
you know, okay. You were at something in DC, and you and your friend had walked through.
You're talking about the title of the book?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I thought, oh, great, I'm making
No,
something
no.
up here.
We were getting ready to go in the West Wing. I was invited as a guest to sit with Michelle Obama for President Obama's last State of the Union address. And I was there in uniform. And I had an opportunity to bring a +1. Well, my kids were kind of young at the time, and it wasn't something I was going to take them out of school for, because I think it was like a Tuesday night. And so my husband was going to stay home with the kids. He wasn't going to come with me. And I have a friend, her name's Sue Fulton. She's one of the first women to graduate from West Point in 1980. And she's also an activist with Sparta, which has helped get a lot of like Don't Ask, Don't Tell repealed, and a lot of other LGBTQI plus. I'm sorry that I didn't get that completely correct. I know it's changed since I've been in that world. But she's an amazing activist who's done a lot for that community. And she also works in the political circles. She's very comfortable in that world. I am not comfortable in that world. And so I invited her as my +1. Number one, I knew she would enjoy it. And number two, I knew she'd have my back. And there were several articles and a lot of social media posts written about the fact that I invited a gay activist, the first person to have a lesbian wedding in the West Point Chapel. There's a lot of stuff she's done over the years and been noticed for it. And her and I were talking, and I was really surprised. I was like, why do people care that you're gay? Like, out of all the reasons why I like talking to you, and her and I have very different views socially and politically. Like, there's a lot of things we argue about. So if you follow me on social media, you'll actually see what would seem to somebody who doesn't know the two of us as negative banter between Sue and I. But I still love her, and I love that I can disagree with her. So we're sitting there and talking. I'm like, out of all of the reasons why we're friends, gay is just not the adjective I would describe you. You're not my gay friend. Like, you're my activist friend. You're my strong-willed friend. You're my bossy friend. You're my you're well-dressed friend. There's a lot of things you are, but you're not my gay friend. Like, that's not. And she goes, yeah, I just wish sometimes people would delete the adjective. And when she said that, I was like, boom. So we were doing all of our social media posts, and it was hashtag SOTU, State of the Union. And they had asked us to do that for some publicity for President Obama's last State of the Union. So it could be searched for. And then I did that and then hashtag delete the adjective. And that was in 2016. My book came out in 2023 and delete the adjective was no matter how much the editor told me it's not the greatest title because it sounds like it's an English book. It really embodies everything I feel. Like, what are we talking about? We're not talking about women. We're talking about a strength requirement. We're not talking about my age. We're talking about a capabilities requirement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So, now I think the answer is yes, but now with Ranger School, are women just a regular part of attending the school?
They are, and it's a lower percentage than males, obviously. Women in the military, I think, were what, 10, 15%. It's not very high. And then women in combat arms is even lower than that. But there's been over 150 women who have graduated from Ranger School, I believe. I stopped tracking, to be honest. And it's just a regular occurrence. And one of the interesting things is just this week, I was speaking to a man whose son is an instructor at Ranger School. And he's like, I just called my son and I was a little weirded out that women were there. I didn't realize it. Like even in 2024, there's people who don't know that this is a thing. And 9 years later, and he's like, where do they go to the bathroom? Where do they change? Where do they sleep? And his son was like, Dad, they're just one of the guys. Like they're just soldiers. And it was so fantastic to hear that that's the change. 9 years later, there's no cameras. There's no discussion about what color sports bras women should be wearing. Like all of that stuff was what we dealt with in 2015. In 2024, we're dealing with training qualified soldiers to do the job that we require of them and a little bit more.
And so the answer I would give them is, this is an entrenching tool. Dig a hole. That's where I go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's something that people are really worried about. And if you've been in the military, you understand. I've changed in my fart sack. You're the only girl in a tent. So you jump in your sleeping bag, you change your clothes. And when the boys need to change, you either pull your fart sack over your head or you walk outside the tent. It's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm. So what now? Like, and this is what I like about you. Okay. You did not go to, well, I don't know. I can't read your mind. I don't know you like that. But from what I know of you, which is so limited, you didn't go to Ranger School to say, watch me, I'm a badass. No, you're a badass, yes. But you didn't okay, or not. But you didn't go to Ranger School to say, hey, look at me, I can do this, whatever. But you did stick to it until you passed all the way through.
Yeah.
And now you can look back and say X number of women have gone through Ranger School, and I played a part in that. Do you ever think about it like that?
I don't. I have had two people in my life who said something that I can never, ever give away. And I was my best friend in high school. So her name's Christy, and we were inseparable. And at one point in time, I got into West Point, and I was pretty cocky because I had tried to, I had wanted, that was my dream from 11 years old. So I'm 18 and I finally get my acceptance letter into West Point and I am walking on water. And she said to me, she goes, I got into my first pick too. It might not be West Point, but I got into my first pick too. And she said it in the way that only a best friend could say it, being not that she wasn't saying my achievement wasn't great. She was saying that I need to make sure that I don't undermine everyone else's achievement who also made their dream, whether it was getting into their school of their dream, getting the job of their dreams, getting a proposal from the man of their dreams. Make sure that you never take that away from somebody else. And then I take that and I add it with the chief of the Army Reserve at the time had said to me, you know what, Lisa? do you know why in 2015 you were the one of the first, or you were the first reserve female to ever graduate from Ranger School? Of course, I'm sitting there going, no, sir. Like, I know he's trying to get to a point, but I don't want to guess. And he said, because nobody was allowed to try in 2014. And I thought, you know what? Women have been capable of this for a really long time. And he wasn't saying it to undermine my accomplishment. He was saying it to remind me that I am the vessel that opened the door, but the door was already cracked open. Just nobody was allowed to walk through yet. And between those two comments, they're not made to be humbling, but they're made to be realistic. And I've done nothing that's extraordinary. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And when I saw the door, I pushed on it.
Okay, so I'm like conflicted about how to respond to that. Like, I didn't do anything special. And there's a part of me that says, yeah, I get that you were just doing what you do and going to another school for you to complete. But then there's another part of me that says, but you could have told that sergeant major who sent you that email, you could have said, no, I passed. I got a husband and kids. So let's give that seat to another female that's deserving. So yeah, you're just an ordinary person just doing her thing, but you didn't turn it down. You didn't say no. And I think you knew, at least had some sort of good idea of what you were getting yourself into, and you did it anyway.
Yeah. But I guess part of that too is I have friends, I have West Point peers that also thought about doing it, but they were at a place in their career where it just didn't work. And so I want to say that, the Ranger tab's interesting because we do tab checks. You look at somebody in uniform and you're like, all right, I know a little bit about you. You look at what their uniform says about them. We used to wear our branches. I used to be very judgy about different branches. Like, I'm an engineer. I automatically love the engineers. And, you go through that. But the other women that could have gone at the same time as me, but said no because their family needed them, because their full-time as reservists, their full-time job needed them, or they were about to take a key development position in their military job, whatever it might have been, they're no less and I'm no better than them because I was able to say yes and they weren't able to at that time. So that's kind of where that's coming from in my heart. Like, there are a lot of women out there who can do amazing things that either never had the opportunity to say yes or never even knew that that was an option for them.
I like that because I think if I was on active duty or a reservist and who was maybe better prepared than I actually was, because I wasn't. I think if I was one of those people that were asked, I probably would have said, "No, I'm good," but give me Lisa's phone number or email address, and I will encourage her the whole way through. Because I don't feel like that's my cup of tea. I don't knock anybody who says that that's their dream to become a ranger.
Right.
And so I will encourage the crap out of you to accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go do it with you.
Right. Right. And there's a lot of things I would never do. This was just one of them that I said yes to.
So what's for you? What's next? You have a full-time job. You're still in the reserves. You got a husband. Did I mention you have two kids as well? And the husband was in the Marine. Is he still in the Marine Corps?
He is. He
Is
is.
he active duty?
He's a reservist.
Okay. So you have quite a dynamic family that's spread
We
all
do.
over the place.
Yes.
Is there anything on your radar that says, okay, my next thing that I want to accomplish is?
For sure. And Tiffany, I know you already know this about me, but I keep my goals statement. I've got two. I've got my annual goals and I've got my long-term goals. My annual goals, I have a home gym and my kids and I And it's not necessarily a January 1st thing, but it's when it's time to reset goals, we reset goals and then I print them out and I laminate them and I put them in our pantry. So you can't even get snacks without being slapped in the face with your goals. And so my short-term goals were pretty simple. And I haven't met my faith goals. I've met the rest of them. I just finished a 700-mile bike ride raising money for Gold Star children. And our team raised over $100,000 for Gold Star children. So every year I try to do a really big stretch goal. My goals on my long-term goals, the things I'm working on right now, though, is I'm up for the next promotion in the military. So I have that. I'd like to
She's
be an
gonna be a
06.
colonel.
God willing,
Oh wait,
don't
I didn't
jinx
mean
me, knock on wood, all that good
I didn't
stuff.
mean to say that out loud.
It would be such an honor for me to say I'm a colonel in the United States Army Reserve. And so that's one of my goals. I'm
I
also,
think you already are a colonel in the army. They're just not paying you for it. Just saying, and you can't put that bird on your shoulder, but what do I know?
well, like I said, fingers crossed. My board is meeting soon, so fingers crossed we'll find out by the summer. I also got in the military. I also got accepted into a war college, so I will be starting war college this summer. So that's a second master's degree for me, as well as my military education. So that's a big goal, but I also still have my physical goal, and that's I want to be a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And because of all those things you listed off that I'm doing in my life, I can only train 2 to 3 hours a week. And so it's going to take me a really, really long time, but I don't care if I'm 60 years old and still on the mats. I plan to be 60 years old still on the mats because I'd rather be the oldest person in the gym than the youngest person in the nursing home. So I'm going to go ahead and I saw that on a Facebook meme. One of the other reasons
Okay,
I
well,
love
it
social.
works.
I'm stealing that from whoever said it first. But those are some of my goals, and I've got, of course, financial goals. But I also want to create a world so that I can be present for my kids. So my number one goal right now is to make sure I'm present because with everything that pulls on me, there's a lot of times where hey, work comes first, or the army comes first, or my training comes first. And for the next 6 years, because I only have my kids at home for 6 more years, my son only for 2.
How old are they
Um,
now?
so they're 16, a junior in high school, and 12, a seventh grader. And with only, seeing how close I am for them graduating, being present, which means, when we're done here, I've got it planned. I'm going to cook dinner and we're all going to sit at the table. So they've done their workouts, they've showered and they're doing their homework now. So the minute we're done with this conversation, we're going to sit down for dinner together and we're going to talk about our days and I'm going to be present. So
Do you have
what's
a no,
next? A
do you
lot
have
is next.
uh, do you have a no iPhone, no I'm saying iPhone, no phone, no tablets at the dinner table kind of thing?
For sure. And if anyone has to grab their phone to like help with their story, they apologize and then turn it off and put face down. Even when we're trying to think of things, nobody's allowed to Google it. We have to use our brains.
What?
Yeah. If you want to remember who that actor is, you either let it bother you for the entire meal until you can get back to your phone, or you start going A, B, C, Charles, first name Charles.
Yeah. So I know this has nothing to do with Ranger School or your book, and I know you have to go have that dinner time. But I want to ask you another question because there is something that I think a lot of people are not aware of, and that's the difficulty of being a military parent, whether you're a single parent or you're both there, but with both of y'all being military and having civilian jobs, like how is that when the military is demanding that says you raised your right hand, you need to do this. How does that balance happen where you do what you got to do at both of your jobs, but you also have to be there for both of your kids?
Yeah. Yeah. So would say the number one thing, and this is more on accident than on purpose, but I married really well. I've emphasized this, but I call my family. I don't call them my family. Our text string is actually Team Jaster, and I call us a team. Now my kids are older at 12 and 16. My son can drive now. He picks up some of the load when required, but we've always been team Jaster. And I married a man who enjoys being a parent. So it's not, I don't have all the domestic duties and then he has all the financial responsibilities. We share the load a lot. And a lot of times I've got to pick up for him, but a lot of times he's picking up for me. We also have figured out some systems of if I want to be present, what doesn't matter. So we pulled out all the Christmas decorations the weekend after Thanksgiving, like everybody else did. The outside of my house, my daughter did it all by herself, and she made the outside of my house look Christmas perfect. The inside of my house is a tree with a box of ornaments next to it. And does it matter if the ornaments get up on the tree between now and Christmas? Hopefully they do. And if they don't, right before I put the presents underneath the tree, I will put the lid on the box and hide it in the closet. I don't care. So that's one of those things, like sometimes something has to give. Being dual military, being dual full-time employees, being parents, what doesn't matter? And sometimes making my kids the most healthy lunch in the world that matters to me. I would love to be a Pinterest mom and cut out little heart peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but instead they get a store-bought salad and a protein shake and maybe some fresh grapes. And hopefully that's good enough. And we're going to try hard, or they can buy lunch at school. So,
if you judge at face value, you're like, okay, so this lady is a badass ranger in the army who wants to cut out hearts in a sandwich.
Well, there is an author who wrote Ashley's War, and as book club members, if you haven't read Ashley's War, you're denying yourself an absolute treat. It's about the first women who were combat support team members, so the CSTs. And Ashley White is the main character that's followed. The author, Gail Laman Samak, it's really hard to pronounce her name, so I had to slow down. She's absolutely phenomenal. I've been able to meet her because of my book tour and some of these other opportunities on several occasions. But she writes in the foreword of her book, and I actually quote her in my book, but she writes about the women living in the and. And that means I want to be a badass and wear eyeliner. I want to be respected and loved. I want to be tough and soft. And I want all of that. I want that and in my life because I am everything. And not to quote Beyonce, but I absolutely love the line in her and I'm not a feminist in the fact that I think women are better than men. I'm a feminist in the fact that I think women and men are all amazing and we're all different and we all deserve the same opportunities to fail or succeed. But Beyonce's song talks about we birth these damn kids and then go back to work. And I want to be able to be proud of that. So I want to go to my son's helmet polishing tomorrow night for his football team. And then right after I'm going to go to my corporate Christmas party where, I'm one of the senior leaders and I have to play a role as a senior leader. Like I want to be hard and I want to be squishy.
Hard and squishy.
Yes. As long as it's not my abs that get squishy.
Yeah, about that. I can show you what that looks like if I stand up.
Stop it.
Just saying. And there's one more question from here. Did you climb mountains? I don't know if they're referring to ranger school or just in general, but did you climb mountains? There was a mountain phase in ranger school, right?
There was a mountain phase, and you actually do mountain climbing, you do rock climbing, you do slick wall climbing, rappelling. We did that as well. There's Mount Yona, so there's actually a graded mountain. I wouldn't call it a climb. It's just a hike with a rucksack. But so physically, yes, at Ranger School, definitely climbed mountains. I've done mountain climbing. I've done rock climbing. I've done bouldering. You'll see I never have long fingernails. So all of my sports are very tactile. But on top of that, I'm going to reference a book, and there was a book it's called The Second Peak. you climb a mountain, and when you get to that top of a mountain and you look forward, you have to understand you live in a mountain range. So don't spend too much time celebrating on that one mountain peak. You've got to look to the next peak, but there's going to be a valley in between. So when you started saying that question, the first thing that came to me is the idea of there is another peak, but there's also a valley. So at some point in time, I'm going to sink and it's going to be low. And my husband, again, is going to be the one who picks me up. Maybe my mom, maybe a friend, maybe Tiffany. I'm going to have a low and I'm going to call or send a text and be like, I'm having a day. And then I'm going to climb another mountain, whether it's being a colonel, whether it's being, I hope to someday have a brigade command. Well, when you're a brigade commander, you're the only person of your rank in that unit, and it's super, super lonely. And there you are, you're back on one of those peaks all alone at a high point in your life, just looking forward at nothing but valleys in the future. So yeah, I mean, have I climbed mountains? I've climbed them physically and mentally.
And emotionally too.
Oh yeah, definitely the emotions,
Oh my
all the
gosh.
emotions.
That's called a roller coaster.
Yes.
Um, and I'm about to have a birthday, so I think they get,
Congratulations.
yeah,
25 again,
no,
right?
huh?
25 again, right?
Times two.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's monumental.
It is.
I never thought that I would see it.
And you're going back to school as well. So, I mean,
Hey,
always achieving, always succeeding, always climbing that next mountain.
you are going to be on a jujitsu mat when you're 60, and I'm
Hmm.
going to get my first job at 60. Or not my first job, but you know what I mean.
I do.
Um, well, thanks again for doing this. I mean, you don't have enough on your plate already, but you cut out some time to do this, and I appreciate it. If people want to buy your book, they can go to your website, deletetheadjective.com. Yeah.
They can. Yeah. Deletetheadjective.com or Amazon or Great Reads, Goodreads, or any of the other book sources. I'm at Barnes and Noble. Um, Literally anywhere you can buy your books, as much as that sounds so sales pitchy.
Well,
Um,
that's why I said it instead of you. I mean,
yeah. But
but
I think the more important thing is I would love to connect with people. So, Tiffany, as you well know, I leave one of my Facebook pages is open. Lisa, delete the adjective is open. Instagram, I don't block anyone unless you talk about my kids negatively. That's
ooh,
that's
that's like fighting words right there.
it's pretty bad. If you comment on my kids, I'm gonna lose it. But
Yeah, I'll
I
tell
am a
you that
mama
your kids
bear.
are awesome.
My kids are awesome, and nobody has a right to talk bad about them. They're the best kids in all of the world. But I do enjoy connecting with people and talking about books and talking about education and talking about politics. I love talking about politics. Anything is fair game for me. So more than buying my book is reach out and connect with your community, and maybe the community includes me.
Yeah, and I will say, I feel like I can vouch for that because you and I, you and I, since you were a guest on the podcast, send text messages, call each other, and I feel like when I ask you how's everything going, you're like, oh, I'm just busy, or I'm worn out because I'm doing everything, and then
Sorry.
you, no, 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 I didn't mean that in a bad way. I meant it in a good way. Like you're always doing something, which is good,
Yeah.
and but you're always asking me what's going on in my world, and I
Yeah.
love that. And I remember sharing a struggle with my weight, and you're like, okay, you got to set a goal, you got to do this. And then I was able to at one point send you like my tracking my weight over like a 6 month or a year time period. And it was moving in the right direction. I thought, man, this is awesome. I have to share it with her.
Yeah.
Now,
And I loved it. I
unfortunately,
was so glad you shared it with me.
yeah, I'm not going to share it with you now because some of that mountain has gone up again.
Well, there's always valleys.
Yeah. Well, my weight is my valley, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you
And
back, Tiffany.
yeah, I'm trying to be like you. So that's how that works. I just want to make sure, yeah, there's no more questions on there. But yeah, thanks again. Yeah, I mean, you're one of those people is like that's like the real deal. And I saw a quote when somebody was I think, writing a review of your book, and I can't remember how they worded it, but when I saw it, I was like, that that is Lisa. Because whatever she said about you was to the point of, you did, it's like you say, yeah, I did ranger school. So what? I did it. Next. And whereas somebody else might be like, yo, I'm the first person in the reserves. I said person because I guess you're not, well, I'm deleting any other adjective. But you're like, you could just like stick your chest out and be like, I'm the first woman in the reserves. I'm the third woman in all the military that completed this school. Yo, I'm what's up. And you don't do that. Um, and I think that's great about you. But
Well, thank you.
no more compliments. I'm done.
Yeah, it just makes me blush. Luckily, I'm
Okay.
wearing too much makeup for you to see that. So
Well, actually, no, I'm kidding. Well, I hope you have a great night with your family.
I will.
And yeah,
You enjoy your evening as well, Tiffany. Thanks for doing this.
yeah, thank you. And I'm gonna, let's see. Uh, Woohoo! You're
Awesome.
awesome.
Well, thanks
For
for doing
real.
this. I am getting
Yeah.
buzzed quite a bit from the better half about when I'm coming in for dinner.
Oh, oops. My bad. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. He
I
understands.
I kept on watching the time, like, are we going too far? Are we doing too much?
It's okay. Did you have a couple people log in?
It looks like the most that was on there at one time was 5.
Okay.
Um, but it
Those
didn't.
these things are never good live, or they're never popular live. They're always popular afterwards.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was struggling with even this morning. Like, I think you saw on social media the way I was kind of selling it was, hey, 2 West Point grads, 2 engineer officers, 2 rangers, same day, different episodes with different stories, kind
Yeah.
of thing. So,
Yeah.
and the same thing was happened there too.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is what it is. What do you do?
No, I think it's great because the what you're going to get later is really what matters.
I think what I want really, which is why I started calling it the Let's Vet Together, is kind of the same principle that you've talked about of, it's not about getting numbers of, I had this many thousand views on my podcast and this many people subscribed. I love community, and I think that's what
Yeah.
it's all about. And I think when we leave the military, whether you did 4 years or 40 years, that's, I mean, you miss that camaraderie that you have in the military.
Yeah. For
So,
sure. For sure. All right,
okay,
Tiffany, I better get myself going, and I apologize for cutting you off here. I just part of it's I got to go to the bathroom.
yeah, me too. I'm just saying, not
All
that you
right.
asked, but I'm like, okay, my bladder is still
All right.
small.
Well, we'll talk soon, okay?
All right, sounds good.